What's up, guys? If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Also, please smash that like button on the video and enjoy the show.
The CIA at the time, specifically Allen Dulles, the director of the CIA, he did not think much of Lumumba. He, at a White House meeting, he mentioned that Lumumba had had this embezzlement conviction. He said that he had taken Soviet or communist money. He really, had written him off. But others in the U.S. government, like the Secretary of State, Christian Herter, like Henry Cabot Lodge Jr., the ambassador to the UN, were much more sympathetic towards Lumumba and thought, oh no, he's, this probably neutral figure we can work with. That was in July 1960. But then the moment Lumumba asked the Soviets for help, that sort of,
Done. Yeah.
The nail was in the coffin there.
Right. So he calls up the Soviets. Like, what do you do? Call up Khrushchev? Like
He
how did
wrote
this
a
go?
telegram to Khrushchev.
Oh, really? Directly to him?
Addressed him. I don't know if it was delivered through the Soviet ambassador, but asking for very specific help, like, planes, trucks, weapons, that sort of thing.
Okay. Now, how does the U.S. respond to that? We already covered that they obviously had a station on the ground and everything. Characters, players, what's going on at this point?
Yeah, so that sets off massive alarm bells in the CIA. And Larry Devlin, he's the CIA station chief in Congo, he sends a cable to his headquarters in D.C. and says, this is the beginnings of a classic communist effort to take over the government. And so then what happens also is there's this August 18th meeting at the White House where President Eisenhower says something to the effect of while he's looking at Dulles, the CIA director says, we need to get rid of Lumumba or something. The exact words are lost to history, but it was clear that, the way Dulles received it was that get rid of meant get rid of in a physical sense.
Is there another way? Is there another way to take that
it's
one?
That, will no one rid me of this troublesome prime minister?
Yeah.
And
oh my God.
So that is the beginning of a series of events where the CIA decides to send poison to the Congo that Larry Devlin, the CIA station chief, is to inject into Lumumba's food or toothpaste so that it'll kill him. And it's it's out of a movie, it feels like, but this crazy plot where Sidney Gottlieb, who is this CIA chemist, is tasked with picking this poison and flying it to Congo to deliver to Larry Devlin, and Devlin is instructed to use it to kill Lumumba.
Oh, like MK Ultra Sidney Gottlieb?
Yeah.
Okay. For people out there that don't know about MK Ultra, that is, say, the psychedelic experiments of the CIA that focused on mind control. And Sidney Gottlieb, who's a very fascinating figure, was at the heart of that. Back in the day, my buddy Danny Jones did an amazing podcast with a guy whose name eludes me right now. He was a longtime New York Times columnist.
Stephen Kinzer, probably?
Might be. I
wrote a book about Gottlieb.
Probably, yeah, it's probably him. And he talked about that a lot. So I guess check out that guy's book because that's a really, really good podcast. But that dude was a fascinating figure. He didn't seem to have like the personality you'd expect from a guy like that. But when did you said he was their head chemist at this point?
Yeah, he was
in 1960?
Yeah, I forget his exact title, but he was in the technical services division of the CIA and was sort of his background was in chemistry, and he was the person you turned to if you wanted to develop or find a poison to kill a leader.
What was his history? Like, how long had he been with the CIA, and did he have a background long before working with them?
Yeah, I think he joined in the 40s, like many of the people in this era did, and he was something of an outsider in that, the CIA was very blue blood, Ivy League. He was Jewish from the Bronx, didn't go to the Ivy League. He was a scientist, but he developed, he rose very quickly because he was brilliant and had this technical mind and was also able to explain things in plain English to everyday, officers within the CIA. That was sort of his what made him get so far ahead. But so anyways, he ends up picking botulinum toxin, which is the poison that causes botulism, and and flies to Leopoldville and delivers it in a bag to Larry Devlin.
Okay, so Devlin, I take it, had assets around Lumumba.
Well, as it turned
plan.
out, he wasn't able to. That was the plan, but he wasn't able to actually gain access to Lumumba's house. So just to sort of bring us to where we are in the story now,
Yep.
Lumumba is in September 1960. He's failed to bring Katanga under his control. The South Kasai secession is still going on. The country is still chaotic. The UN's unable to restore order. Lumumba is overthrown by Kasavubu, the president. Or rather, the president announces that he's fired Lumumba. Lumumba says, "You can't fire me, I fire you."
Did he have the power to do that constitutionally?
This was a great debate. There was a line in the Constitution, an article that you could read to make this argument. The problem, as I mentioned earlier, is that this was there were these traditions in Belgium where the king didn't really intervene, and those. So there was the text, and then there was sort of the understanding of how the powers could be used. So it was a legally dubious maneuver by which Kasavubu fired Lumumba. And it's important to say he was egged on in this by the CIA, who met with him in early August, on August 8th. This is actually something I discovered that I don't think has not been reported in other books, is that very earlier than we thought, on August 8th, the CIA station chief who was leaving the Congo, so not Devlin, but his predecessor, who was still just sort of hanging around, met with Kasavubu and encouraged him to consider firing Lumumba, which he eventually did.
How did he encourage him?
Saying, have you read article whatever of the Constitution? There's this great clause there you should consider using, and that sort of thing.
A veiled threat type deal that if you don't do this, there's going to be a problem for you, or just like, hey, we know you don't like this guy already. Here's a way you can get him out.
I think it was more. I don't think there's any veiled threat aspect to it. It's impossible to say. All we have is the document, the minutes from that meeting.
How'd you discover that, by the way?
That was in the archives. I believe it was at the Eisenhower Presidential Library in Kansas where I went.
Oh, wow.
And so the United States encourages Kasavubu to fire Lumumba, and then it funds street protests against Lumumba. And then finally Kasavubu acts and announces Lumumba's firing in September of 1960. Lumumba says, "No, I fire you." And so there's this impasse where both the country's two top leaders have announced that they've fired each other. And no one really knows what to do, and both claim that they're still in power. And then into the void steps Mobutu, who was head of the army, sort of lurking in the background, steps in and announces that he's now in charge.
And he said he's in charge.
In so many words. He claimed that they were neutralized. He said, the army is stepping in and we're in control now. These politicians are squabbling and I'm intervening to set things right.
Now, he had been friends with Lumumba as we laid out. Do we know of there being any conversations ahead of this where he says, like, you either got to figure this out or I have to, or?
Yeah, so there were, in the 2 or 3 months after independence, Lumumba and Mobutu, their relationship worsened and worsened and worsened. And so at a certain point, Mobutu basically turned on his friend and neutralized him and then put him under house arrest. And that was sort of when he really finally acted against him. And that brings us to where we were, because Larry Devlin was trying to get the poisons into Lumumba's house, where Lumumba was under house arrest, and couldn't find a way to do it.
But the U.S., so August 8th is that meeting where they sit down, CIA sits down with Kasavubu, the previous station chief, and says, oh, you should fire this guy. Because you said that Lumumba called or sent the telegram to Khrushchev in August. Was it before August 8th?
I think it was after August 8th. But at that point, the the knock against Lumumba was not that he had asked the Soviets for help, but that he was unable to control his country and, seemingly maybe open to the Soviets and certainly not a reliable American partner. But it all changed really quickly because August 8th is not that long after his July 20-something visit to D.C. So things were changing by the day.
Right, but they did rebuff him there too. So
Yeah.
they obviously weren't like a fan. Now they're it's almost like they're, I don't know the name for it, but the psychological concept of you call someone something they're not for long enough, they eventually become it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's almost like they were trying to make that happen. Like, oh, this guy's visiting us asking for help in D.C. Fuck him, put him over here. He's probably a communist. He'll become one. And then he ends up, then they're sitting down with the president a few days later in the beginning of August, having this meeting, say, oh, you should get rid of this guy. And then he does actually send a telegram to try to the Soviets.
There is something of a self-fulfilling prophecy here in that, the United States spurned Lumumba thinking he was potentially pro-Soviet, and that really drove him into Moscow's arms.
Right. So he, sometime after the August 8th meeting, he sends that telegram. Now the blood's in the water, and they can say, oh, he actually is they can try to say like, oh, he actually is a communist. And then you said September is when Mobutu steps in and puts him under house arrest.
Mm-hmm. Or September is when Mobutu steps in and takes charge. I think he puts him under house arrest in October of 1960.
Okay, so two angles I want to go to here. Let's go Lumumba and then Mobutu, as far as like their contact with the Soviets and the U.S. respectively. So when Lumumba sends that telegram to Russia and it gets to the higher ups in the Russian government, do they end up sending any of the stuff he requested?
Yes, but most of it never got there in time.
Before he was like arrested or something.
Yeah. So this was sort of thing I had to look at carefully. They're all, it became conventional wisdom that Khrushchev sent all these planes. The planes appear to have never made it out of Stanleyville. Weapons didn't successfully enter the country. They were in Cairo waiting to be flown into the Congo. There were these 100 trucks that were sent. Their fate is kind of unclear. So, we don't know exactly what happened to every single piece of equipment, but the long story short is the Soviet aid was too little too late, because by the time it finally arrived, that was when Lumumba was fired by Kasavubu and then shortly after sort of neutralized by Mobutu.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. Please hit that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.